If you had nothing to offer but your bare, uncomfortable, unproductive self, who in your life will still know how to love you without trying to consume you? This is a rough and a dark part. And it is one of the most sophisticated tragedies a person can live through because on the surface, it looks like love. It sounds like one. It even comes dressed in gratitude, affection, and praise. People call you when they need your wisdom. They reach out to you when their life is on fire. They lean on your discipline, money, presence, strength, generosity, emotional control, and even your vulnerability. And for a while, that feels meaningful. It feels good to matter, to be chosen. It feels good to know your presence changes the temperature of a room. But somewhere in the dark, a terrible question starts forming. A question so sharp, most people are terrified to process it within them. Would I still be loved if I arrived empty? That question doesn't come from insecurity, it comes from pattern recognition. Because you've noticed that people celebrate your fruits, but they never recognize your roots. They admire the light you give, but never wonder what it costs you to keep it burning. They love you as a where, but not as a wilderness, as a resource, not a reality, a shelter, not a soul. They take your patience, listening ear, availability, resilience. They take your emotional oxygen. And then they leave you with the economic ruins of your own life, expecting you to keep producing as if extraction has no consequence. That's the exhaustion you carry, not really the exhaustion of giving, the exhaustion of realizing that some people never built a relationship with you. They built a supply chain. They do not know your silence. They have no idea what your private fears are or what your spirit sounds like when it's not been useful. They do not know your inner winters, your unspoken grief, your unfinished thoughts, and invisible hunger. But they know your service routes. They know the hours your airport stays open. They know exactly where to land when they need refueling, but they do not know you. But the soul can only survive under such for so long before it collapses under its own generosity. Because when your value keeps getting measured by only what you can produce, you begin to panic at your own emptiness at some point. You feel guilty for needing rest. You resent your own humanity because it interrupts your output. You start treating your own breakdown as an inconvenience to the people who benefit from your output, who benefit from your functioning. That's how deep the damage goes. You don't just become overused by others, you become unavailable to your own self. You stop asking, how am I doing? And all you ask is, what next do they need from me? You stop seeing yourself as a living being, and all you do is see yourself as an infrastructure, a bridge, a generator, a charging station, a room people enter for warmth while your own walls lose heat. And what makes this pain especially brutal is because it comes with applause. People thank you, they praise you, they call you amazing. Some even say they don't know what they will do without you. But listen carefully, that's not always a compliment. Sometimes that's just an evidence. Evidence that they've built their emotional survival around your depletion. Evidence that your worth in their life rises in direct proportion to how much of yourself you're willing to spend. Evidence that your love has been treated less like a sacred presence and more like a renewable utility. And that kind of love will hollow you out while making you feel honored. So now you're tired in a way that feels older than your body because being loved for what you provide creates a very specific spiritual starvation. You are surrounded by connection, but you're still unfed, needed, but not known, praised, but not met, reached for, never reached into. It's like being a five-star hotel where everyone checks in with needs, expectations, noise, hunger, and luggage. But nobody asks who cleans the room of the soul after they leave. Nobody asks whether the lights are flickering, whether the foundations are cracked, whether the host is secretly bleeding behind the front desk. They just keep booking nights. And here is the darkest part. If this has gone long enough, you may have started participating in your own extraction. You may have started handing people the polished version of yourself because you are terrified that the unproductive version will be too ordinary to keep. You may have seduced people with usefulness because usefulness feels safer than intimacy. Because if they need what you do, maybe you would not have to risk whether they can handle who you are. And that's the prison. You perform value so you do not have to test love. But a soul cannot breathe inside conditional belonging forever. At some point, your life has to become much more than just a marketplace. At some point, you have to stop offering your blood as proof of your love. At this point, you have to face the possibility that anyone who only knows how to love your output has never actually encountered you. Maybe your next flame is not becoming more generous. Maybe it's finally refusing to be a sacred place treated like a public transportation. Maybe it's shutting down the airport long enough to ask who would still stay if no flights were leaving, no cargo was moving, no answers were being given, no labor was being performed, and no emotional fuel was being distributed.